think about descriptive feedback and learning in a school organization is that learning needs to take place at every level of the system. And that learning basically is a fractal. So what adult learning looks like is not so different from what student learning looks like. Basically, learning looks like learning. And the question is, how do you engage people in a learning process rather than a performance process? So when a principal comes in and observes a teacher, what is the principal actually looking for? If we think about learning, about teaching, as an analogy to learning about math, it's the same idea. You're trying to make meaning. So what is it that teachers actually do that result in student learning? What are the things, the moves, the beliefs that help a teacher develop a practice that actually results in student learning? Then you have to look at the principles. What does the principal think those things are? Is the principal focused on vital behaviors, or is the principal focused on superficial checklists? So let's assume that we are focused on vital behaviors, and what we're trying to figure out is how to give each other descriptive feedback that results in learning, which is a big assumption, because that's not usually what we're focused on. So what does descriptive feedback from principal to teacher look like? First of all, it's based on evidence of what actually happened in the classroom. Is there any evidence that students learned anything? And what are we going to use as evidence? And how do we talk about that in a way that both adults are not taking any of this personally, but are actually learning? So the principal might, in the same way that I'm suggesting teachers ask students questions, the principal might ask teachers questions. For example, when you describe the meaning of distributive property, what evidence did you have that students actually understood what you meant? What evidence do you have that students now know how to apply the distributive property strategically when looking at computational problems? And the teacher would then say, well, they were able to fill out the worksheet. Now the principal says, well, I don't see that as real evidence. I see that as kind of regurgitating what you showed them. I don't see that as evidence of learning. I see that as evidence of following directions. I wonder if there's another way we could look a little deeper. Is there some other way we could think about what it really looks like when people are able to compute fluently? Because one characteristic of people being able to compute fluently is that they look to the numbers to determine what strategy they're going to use. And I noticed that all your students use the same strategy no matter what the numbers were. Now that implies, number one, that the principal knows something about what it takes to learn mathematics, which is not often the case. So this notion of what is the principal actually going to focus on depends on principal content knowledge, principal beliefs, teacher content knowledge, and teacher beliefs, as well as what we understand to be effective pedagogy. Sometimes principals can focus on pedagogy, so he or she may not know that the mathematics wasn't particularly deeply learned, but the way they know that is because none of the students said very much. So then we could focus on talk in the classroom, which gets us back to descriptive feedback. In other words, if I have an expertise in the idea that discourse is where thinking is revealed, then as a principal, I could at least be looking for the interactions that teachers are having with students and whose voices are being heard and valued in the classroom. So our conversation after the lesson with the teacher could be around that, but it might not then get to the depth of content. We then would both have to agree that student voices and getting students to tell you what they're thinking are important things. We assume that we both think that, but that may not be the case. The teacher may assume that getting through her lesson and covering the curriculum is what matters. And teachers slowing down to hear what kids have to say takes up too much time. I don't have time for this. I've got to get through my lesson. So you've got two different ideas about what matters on the table. The question becomes, how do you address that?